Hi, it's been a while. Um, and the reason for that is multifaceted. Um, on one hand, I've just been very busy in my own personal life, working at the shop with Rob, working on homework as we approach finals, um, trying to keep the house together as best I can, which isn't great, I'll be honest. Um, so just generally a lot going on. On the other hand, I wanted to take a few days after the election to really let it sink in the state of the nation, uh, and to wait and see how the first couple weeks were going to go, as we prepare for President elect Donald Trump. Real quick, I just wanted to say if you're enjoying this video so far, please go ahead, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and leave a comment below with any of your thoughts you might have. I really want to do well in my journey through YouTube. And YouTube does take a few factors into consideration when they're promoting my video. Number one is watch time. So if you're not going to watch until the end, please just watch a little bit longer than you would have before. The next thing is whether or not you like the video. So if you want to support me, that's the easiest way to do it. Just give this video a like. And the third is whether or not you subscribe. So if you're not subscribed already, again, please go ahead, ring that bell. And is it a bell anymore? Whatever. The point is, please subscribe. All right, back to the content. I didn't cry, which is a step up from 2016. When he won in 2016, I did cry. I was much younger, much more naive, much more convinced that there was just no way that he would develop the kind of support needed in order to win. And although he did not win the popular vote in 2016, he did win the popular vote this year. And that hit me a little harder because it wasn't just a matter of the Electoral College. It was a matter of the left not getting enough people inspired or involved to vote. Unfortunately, the way that the country is going, we have this perception that everything is just awful. We're still recovering from COVID. And I think a lot of people just don't recognize those things and feel as though we should be back to normal already. What I do want to say is the US economy, in terms of the global economy, is number one in terms of places that were impacted by inflation. I mean, that was pretty much everywhere, but those countries that had incredibly high inflationary responses to the pandemic and supply shortages ultimately rebounded for the most part, or are rebounding, and the US economy is rebounding faster than any other. So I do want to say that although prices are high and corporations are raking in record-breaking profits, the economy is improving. And then Trump comes out with this tariffs business. If you don't already know, I'm sure you've looked it up by now, but tariffs are essentially a tax that is placed on imported products. So if you get anything from outside of the country, there's going to be at least a 10% tax on that product. Now, the companies that actually import the products are the ones who have to pay that 10% tariff. However, if you're a company that's used to making, let's say, a $5 profit margin per sale, and your costs just increased 10%, you're going to increase the cost of the product 10% to keep your profit margin the same. I mean, unfortunately, we live in a capitalistic society. That's what's going to happen. So the cost of these tariffs is really going to be passed on to the consumer. The intent, and while I understand the intent, I disagree with the action. The intent is supposed to drive businesses to switch to American made products. And where that's possible, I think that's fantastic. I would hope businesses would do that. But unfortunately, even with the tariff, it may still be cheaper to import the product than it is to manufacture here in the US. Therefore, most corporations are likely going to pass that increase in cost onto the consumer rather than increase their costs further by trying to switch to American manufacturers. The second thing that Trump promised that I take huge issue with is mass deportation. I take issue with this for several reasons. One being they aren't just talking about deporting criminals. I mean, if you are an undocumented resident and you of the United States and you commit a crime and you're caught for committing that crime, you are already processed through your crime is processed through a trial. Once that trial is completed, or whether you plead guilty, you are deported. So we're already deporting criminals at least as much as we can, as much as we catch them. But this is going to essentially round up and deport any and every undocumented immigrant that they can find. And they intend to tap into law enforcement and military personnel resources in order to accomplish this. Estimates as to the cost of mass deportation are somewhere in the $90 billion range. So we're going to spend all of this money on deporting about 5% of the American workforce. And it's, primarily agricultural jobs, hospitality industry, construction. Those are the places where most undocumented immigrants are employed. So we're going to see a major problem filling those roles. In addition, companies that employ undocumented immigrants typically pay much, much less for their labor than they do for labor of American citizens. So if you are a company or a corporation that employs undocumented immigrants and you now have to switch to documented labor, citizens for your labor, you're going to have to pay more. And again, you're going to increase your prices in order to maintain your profit margin. Again, we live in a capitalistic society. Typically, those on the right love capitalism. This is what capitalism does. It passes all of these increased costs onto the consumer. In addition, he has appointed people to his cabinet and to other prominent positions, such as Attorney General, based on their loyalty to him, not their qualifications. And that's just, you can't convince me otherwise. Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, first and foremost, he's never practiced as a lawyer. He graduated law school, sure, but then he proceeded to, I'm going to fact check myself because I want to make sure I'm accurate. Yeah, no, never served as an actual lawyer. So, that's one reason why Matt Gaetz is absolutely an abysmal pick. The next reason he's an abysmal pick is because there are credible allegations against him for the sexual abuse of a minor. I don't know how else to put it. It's that simple. When you have sex with a minor, they cannot consent. Therefore, you're breaking the law. You're committing abuse. You're not just having sex, or you can't claim it was consensual when, number one, they were 17, and number two, you paid them almost $10,000 in what I can only assume is hush money. It's absolutely just abysmal. Then there's his, what was she? Russia lover. Gabbard. Is it Tulsi? Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah, for the intelligence community. Somebody who over and over again has parroted back Russian propaganda. And you're putting her in charge of the US intelligence agencies. I cannot see a reason for this other than these people have demonstrated loyalty to Trump. Therefore, he believes he'll be able to do whatever he wants to do with them in office in those positions. Now, the next thing that concerns me greatly about this Trump presidency is the environmental deregulation that will most certainly occur. So, for example, to lean less on renewable sources of energy and focus more on fossil fuels will not only leave the US dependent on other countries in order to maintain the level of energy consumption that we have, but also will prevent states from setting their own pollution standards, their own regulatory regulations. Essentially saying fuck the environment. And in a time where it is so clear that climate change is becoming a more and more pressing issue as time goes on and as things go uncorrected, it's just a matter of time before we lose part of Florida, to the ocean. It's honestly just shocking. The lack of awareness, the lack of scientific support for these ideologies. It's baffling. The next thing that's going to be very concerning for me, in my opinion, is the restructuring of federal agencies. When I say restructuring, I really mean erasing, not disintegrating, dismantling, the dismantling of federal agencies. So, for example, I want the list, so I want to be very clear. Okay, obviously the Department of Education, that's a major one. He wants to eliminate it. I literally do not understand why. It's like, it's this idea that they're weaponizing education, which is ultra concerning. Like, education is supposed to be fundamental and paramount it's supposed to be a bipartisan issue. We should want the most educated citizens. We should want the most educated people out there voting and making decisions that ultimately will affect all of us. Without that education, without maintaining the level of accountability for states, I don't see any response to things like, I believe it's in Oklahoma, the governor, here, let me look it up. Governor supplies Trump Bibles to schools. Yeah, Oklahoma. The superintendent of public instruction, Ryan Walters, is essentially saying that they are selecting newly mandated Bibles in classrooms. Mandated Bibles in classrooms. And the mandates that the restrictions that they put for what Bibles can be put in classrooms is so specific, it literally just means it has to be a Trump Bible, because the Bible has to contain the Pledge of Allegiance, Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and is the New King James Version of the New and Old Testament. So it has to contain all of those things and has to be bound by leather or a material like leather. That's a Trump Bible. That's a $60 Bible that you're mandating be put in all classrooms or all schools. Classrooms. Separation of church and state, where are you? Like, hello. This should be so obviously wrong. I should not need to say it. But we live in a society where things that are obviously wrong are just not obvious to everybody. So this is obviously not cool. I mean, number one, requiring that a Bible be made available in a classroom, not cool. Number two, requiring that Bible be a Trump Bible, therefore enriching our president, not fucking cool. That is like a major conflict of interest. But dismantling the Department of Education means that there's no regulatory agency that can go after this state for trying to enforce that rule, or this school district for trying to enforce that rule. It's just truly abysmal. The Veteran Affairs Department. So essentially, they want to, so essentially they want to shrink the VA and expand use of private care. They don't want to take on the care of our veterans anymore, apparently. It's too expensive. We can spend $90 billion deporting millions of undocumented immigrants that contribute to our economy, but our veterans, they deserve less, because that makes sense. The IRS, they want to essentially fire or lay off how many employees? I'm looking for a number. At least 10,000 people. Because that's what was added during the Biden administration, and essentially they're looking to shrink the IRS again. They're refusing to essentially extend the funds that were given to the IRS in order to hire these people, and so without the extension of those funds, they won't be able to afford to pay those people. Therefore, they will have to lay off those people. The Health and Human Services Department. This is going to Robert Kennedy Jr. Oh my God. This guy is a nut job. Number one, he's an anti-vaxxer. Most people in the United States believe in vaccines. Most people in the United States do not believe that vaccines are harmful. In fact, they believe that vaccines are necessary in order to keep things like polio, measles, chickenpox at bay. I mean, there's a reason why we have no cases, if any, or few, if any, cases of those diseases since those vaccines became mandatory. So he would eliminate that. And Trump literally said Kennedy can do whatever he wants at public health agencies. So that's awesome. Okay. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, we probably already knew that was going to take a major cut, if not a complete dismantling. They're planning on reversing environmental regulations and rescinding climate funds that were set aside in the Inflation Reduction Act. And essentially, terminating low value programs while identifying relocation opportunities for other individuals. So people who he wants to keep, he'll find another place for them. People who he doesn't want to keep, he's just going to fire and completely dismantle the Environmental Protection Agency. So that thing that, helps us maintain clean water, clean air, try to reduce pollution, like that's going away. The Justice Department. This is absolutely ridiculous. When Trump was in office last time, he used the Justice Department in a defensive way. He prevented himself from much scrutiny. And this time, he has made it fairly clear that he plans to go after his opponents. He has instructed the DOJ to investigate the unlawful domination and discrimination and civil rights abuses carried out by the Biden administration. He has said several times that he wants to use the Department of Justice in order to attack his political opponents, and I absolutely see him doing that. I quite frankly, I don't know anyone who could say that's not his plan. The thing that most concerns me about Trump and the fact that he has won is the characteristics that he shares with authoritarian and fascist leaders. And I mean, this is just facts. Like, this is not an extremist point of view. This is not somebody blowing things out of proportion. This is not me taking a few small things he's said and blowing them way up out of proportion. I mean, this is just reality. Authoritarian leaders often seek to erode public trust in democratic systems, including the judiciary, media, and the electoral processes. Now, we don't need to even go back that far. We can go back to January 6th, 2021, when an insurrection took place and he was there enjoying it. People were breaking windows, breaking into the Capitol building, and he was tweeting. Not to tell them to stop, by the way, not for several hours, but tweeting about nonsense about the election, still claiming to this day that he won that election, undermining the not process, but I mean, I suppose process, undermining the entire process that we all put our faith and trust in. He has also disparaged judges who have ruled against him, claiming that it was a personal attack, claiming that anyone who goes up against him is corrupt, and has labeled the media the enemy of the people. So people who report on him and on his actions negatively are then called enemies, and it's claimed that they are so totally biased that they couldn't possibly be telling the truth about any of the things that he does or says. Undermining those things, undermining the media, undermining the Justice Department, undermining civil processes like elections is entirely what happens in authoritarian leaderships. It's just a reality. I mean, Vladimir Putin is a wonderful example of that. He controls the media in Russia. And any journalists that speak out against him are, called liars, potentially killed. Like, it's very serious over there. And I'm not saying we're there yet, but what I am saying is when we install a leader like this, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could get there. The next thing is fascist regimes typically aim to consolidate power in the executive branch and bypass checks and balances. And we see this already with him attempting to jam recess appointments down the throats of every single Democratic and Republican representative and senator that serves in the U.S. Congress. I mean, when he appoints somebody like Matt Gaetz to Attorney General, the only thing I can think is he wants somebody who A, is loyal, and B, is blackmailable. Because Matt Gaetz has already undergone an ethics investigation into him essentially sex trafficking underage girls. And we aren't going to see that report. They have voted to not allow us to see that report. But Trump wants this guy to get confirmed anyway. That, in my opinion, is very clearly him trying to influence the Department of Justice for personal and political reasons. Like, that's not what the Department of Justice is for. Our chief law enforcement officer in the United States should not be somebody who should be in jail. Like, that should not need to be said again. Like, that is just so blatantly obvious. The next thing that they definitely have in common is fascist leaders often use ultra-nationalist rhetoric, and they target minority groups or foreign entities as scapegoats for societal issues. Hello, trans people and immigrants. You guys have become the scapegoats of the Trump administration. Inflation is high, prices are ridiculous. Most people don't have savings. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And unfortunately, all that anger has to go somewhere. The thing that Trump did very, very well over the course of the last few years is he gave people a place to put that anger. He led people into believing that the reason why things are so bad, the reason why your life isn't better is because of immigrants, is because of trans people, is because these things are unnatural, immoral, taking jobs away from hardworking Americans, which is just not true, by the way. They take jobs we don't want. But regardless, he has, in addition to that, used America First rhetoric over and over and over again, coupled with policies like the travel ban from Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries, and other anti-immigrant measures such as the mass deportation he wants to put into effect, and has repeatedly framed immigrants and China as existential threats to American prosperity and security. That is scapegoating. That is othering a group of people in order to make yourself seem like the person who can solve the problem. We have a problem, we've identified it, we can easily solve it. It's these people. We need to get rid of these people, whatever that means. The next thing, this is tricky. I wasn't sure I wanted to say this, but I think I'm going to. Authoritarians frequently foster a personality cult, portraying themselves as the sole savior of the nation. Trump has repeatedly emphasized his unique ability to fix America, to make it great again. He has essentially built a movement around his personal image rather than any policies he has or a specific ideology. He has done easily the best job of branding himself. I mean, even during his presidency, he's selling Trump merch, and ridiculous Trump merch, golden sneakers, $100,000 watches, Trump Bibles. Like, for Pete's sake, people, are we really gonna sit here and act like our news stream should be a QVC episode? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And the last one that I really, really would like to emphasize is fascist regimes often operate outside the legal frameworks, undermining the rule of law to serve their agendas. He has repeatedly and openly disregarded norms around the impartiality of law enforcement, seeking loyalty from officials like the Attorney General, and pardoned allies accused of corruption or misconduct, and plans to pardon January 6th insurrectionists, plans to pardon people that have served alongside him and proven themselves to him. Hell, he would pardon himself if he could, I'm sure, which I don't even know if that's how that's going to play out. We have a president who's been convicted of 34 felonies and now likely won't be sentenced, at the very least, until after he serves his presidency. And at that point, who knows what we're going to be looking at. I I just think that we are headed in a very dangerous direction. And I think it's important that we talk about it, that we're all open about it, and that we call it out when we see it. Because in 2 years' time, or 3 years' time, or 4 years' time, I hope that we can have another election and somebody else comes into power peacefully. I hope that the country does well under Trump. I really do. But I don't see that happening from the few policies he does have and the way that he's gone about enriching himself. And not just with money, but with power. I mean, there comes a point where somebody doesn't want more money, they just want more power. And I mean, money would be great, but essentially it's the power that they're after. And that's how I feel about Trump. He gets a kick out of being the leader of the free world. And he wants to maintain that power for as long as he possibly can. Yeah, that's really everything I wanted to talk about. I'll probably do another video on Project 2025 in a couple of weeks and just break down all of the concerning things within that, and how, even though he said he had nothing to do with Project 2025, how he's appointed several of its authors to various positions in his cabinet and his other nominations. It's disheartening, but again, I remain hopeful that we will get through this together. Hang in there, guys.